When the shovel hit something alive, every worker stepped back. A father froze when he saw his little girl's grave rising higher each morning, as if something beneath was fighting to reach the light. No one believed him, except the one man everyone doubted. But when the truth finally broke through the soil, it didn't just expose what was buried. It tore open every heart watching. This is the moment that made a father collapse in tears. On most mornings, Willow Creek Cemetery looked almost peaceful. The old iron gate squeaked the same tired note when Malik Johnson pushed it open, the same way it had squeaked every weekday for the past 3 years. The air was always a little cooler inside the cemetery, like the big oak trees were holding the city at arm's length. Mist clung to the grass in a thin white sheet, softening the edges of headstones and blurring the names carved into gray stone. Malik adjusted the strap of his worn backpack on his shoulder and stepped onto the gravel path. His sneakers, once bright white and now the color of city dust, crunched quietly. He wore the same navy hoodie he always wore on early shifts at the community kitchen downtown. It wasn't much against the Atlanta morning chill, but it was what he had. He didn't have to cut through Willow Creek to get to the bus stop, not really. He could have walked the long way down Maple and over to the main road. But the cemetery was quiet. Nobody yelled at him to move. Nobody locked their car doors when he walked past. In here, all the judging eyes were made of stone. He kept his gaze low, counting his breaths like his counselor at the shelter had taught him years ago. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 1, 2. 1, 2. It helped keep the memories from crowding in. Nights on park benches. The sound of his mother coughing in their tiny apartment. The way people had always looked at him, like trouble, even when he was just tired. He was almost to the far gate when something tugged at his attention. At first he couldn't say what it was. Just a feeling, like when you walk into a room and know something's been moved. His steps slowed. His eyes drifted off the path, across rows of headstones lined up neat as teeth. The same angels, the same crosses, the same marble slabs lying flat on the earth. Except one. Malik stopped. Near the center of the cemetery, under a maple tree that was just starting to bud, there was a grave he'd come to recognize. A small white headstone with a name written in curling letters. Lila Rivers. The stone had a little carved butterfly in the corner, its wings open like it was about to fly away. The last time he'd walked by, the ground in front of Lila's stone had been like all the others, flat, trimmed, a neat rectangle covered in grass. Now it wasn't flat at all. Malik stepped off the path without really deciding to. His heart gave a strange, uncomfortable kick. The closer he got, the more wrong it looked. The rectangle of grass covering Lila's grave was swelling upward, rounded in the middle like someone had pushed from underneath. It wasn't a little bump you'd miss if you weren't looking. It was a mound, a low green hill rising out of the earth, where there shouldn't have been anything but level ground. He stopped a few feet away, brown eyes narrowing. "That wasn't like that yesterday," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. He knew because he noticed things. You did that when you spent a lifetime making sure you weren't in the way, weren't in danger, weren't about to be blamed for something you didn't do. You learned to pay attention, and he remembered this grave, specifically. The small teddy bear someone had left at its base last week. The pink plastic pinwheel that had spun wildly in a storm the night before and then lay crooked the next day. Malik glanced around. No one else seemed to see it. A middle-aged couple stood by a row of older stones on the far side, heads bowed. A groundskeeper in a green jacket pushed a cart near the maintenance shed. A jogger in bright running shoes cut along the outside fence, music spilling from her headphones. Nobody looking at Lila's grave. Nobody looking at him. He stepped closer until his toes touched the edge of the raised earth. The mound was smooth, covered in grass that looked different, brighter, greener. The dew on it caught the thin morning light and gleamed like tiny stars. For a second, it almost looked beautiful. Then the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. "Graves don't do that," he whispered. His chest felt tight. He'd seen fresh graves settle over time, watched dirt sink a little as rain and weight pushed it down. But he had never seen the opposite. Graves didn't grow. They didn't rise like bread dough in an oven. He crouched without thinking, his knees popping a little as he went down. Carefully, like he was touching something fragile, Malik pressed his fingertips into the grass at the top of the mound. It was soft, like a sponge. Beneath the thin layer of roots, the soil gave easily under his touch. It felt loose, not packed like it should have been. And there was something else, too. He pressed his hand deeper, flattening his palm against the earth. Warmth. He snatched his hand back, heart stuttering. No. That had to be in his head. He rubbed his palm against his jeans, then reached out again, this time holding his breath. He pressed his hand flat on the mound and stayed there, counting silently. 1, 2, 3. The earth was cool on top from the morning air, but just under that, it was unmistakable. Warm, almost like someone had left a heating pad buried just below the surface. Not hot, not burning, just alive. Malik swallowed hard. The cemetery suddenly felt less quiet and more like something was holding its breath, watching. He looked up at the headstone, at the butterfly carved in the corner, at the name he'd read so many times without meaning to. Lila Rivers, beloved daughter, 2015 to 2024, 9 years old. He thought of the canned vegetables he'd served last month at the community kitchen to a girl about that age, her braids bouncing when she laughed at one of his dumb jokes. He pushed the memory aside. This wasn't the time. His gaze slid over the dates again, then dropped back to the swelling earth. A picture pushed into his mind, uninvited and unwelcome. A small white coffin down under there, something moving beneath it, or through it, or... Stop, he muttered, cutting himself off. He didn't do horror movies. He didn't need more nightmares. Still, he couldn't shake the wrongness of it. The way the mound rose where everything else lay flat. The way the grass looked like it was reaching somehow. The way the soil felt warm, like a sleeping animal's back. He stood slowly, his knees stiff. His bus would be coming soon. If he missed it, he'd be late opening the kitchen, and Ms. Gloria would fuss at him even though she liked him. The line of folks waiting for breakfast didn't care about strange graves or warm dirt. They just needed hot coffee and something in their stomachs. But Malik didn't move. He turned in a slow circle, scanning the cemetery again, searching for any sign that he wasn't alone in what he was seeing. The couple had left. The jogger was gone. The groundskeeper had disappeared behind the chapel. Cars rolled by on the road outside the fence, windows up, people on their phones. Life moving on, the way it always did. Nobody looking at the grave. Nobody looking at him. His pulse thudded in his ears. If he walked away now, would someone else notice? Would anyone care if something was wrong with a little girl's resting place? Or would they just see what they always saw? A nice stone, a carved butterfly, a neat green lawn. He stared at the mound. The wind moved through the maple's bare branches above, making a hollow sound, like a breath being pulled in and held. A part of him, the tired part that had been burned too many times, whispered that this wasn't his business, that getting involved in things never went well for people who looked like him. That the last time he tried to tell security about a broken emergency exit at the shelter, They'd accused him of messing with the door. "Walk away," that voice said. "Go catch your bus. Serve your meals. Keep your head down." But another part of him, smaller and stubborn and still alive despite everything, whispered something else. "If that was your mama down there. If that was you," he clenched his jaw. "This ain't right," he said under his breath. His words disappeared into the fog. He took one last look at the grave, at the mound that hadn't been there yesterday, and somehow felt like it was breathing right under his hand. A chill walked down his spine, slow and deliberate, even as a faint warmth still tingled in his palm from where he'd touched the earth. Malik stepped back, heart beating a little too fast, and finally turned toward the gate. Gravel crunched under his shoes again as he hurried for the bus stop, but his thoughts stayed behind, circling that one impossible hill of grass in a sea of flat, silent ground. Out on the sidewalk, the city noise rushed back in. Engines, horns, a distant siren. He pulled up his hood and merged into it like he always did. Just another man in a worn jacket on his way to a job most people would never think about. Even so, the question chased him down the block, tugging at his mind with cold fingers. So why was he the only one who could see that something was wrong with that grave? "Why am I the only one seeing this?" Malik whispered, more to himself than to the empty street, and the words hung in the air like a promise that this was only the beginning. The bus hissed to a stop beside him, brakes squealing in a long, tired sigh. Malik climbed aboard, tapping his worn transit card, and slid into a seat near the back. Morning passengers were half awake, faces blank under flickering fluorescent lights. Someone coughed. Someone else snored softly against the window. The city rolled on. But Malik couldn't shake the feeling that the ground had been breathing under his hand. By the time the bus dropped him off downtown, the fog had thinned, replaced by the gray-blue glow of early light bouncing off glass office buildings. He walked quickly toward the Riverside Community Kitchen, the familiar smell of coffee and warm bread drifting from the back door. Inside, Miss Gloria, short, round, and sharp-tongued, was already barking orders at the volunteers. "You're late by 3 minutes, sugar," she said without looking at him. "Don't make me come drag you out of that cemetery." His heart skipped a beat. "How'd you know I—" "Honey, you walk in here with graveyard fog still clinging to your sleeves every morning. I ain't blind." She finally turned toward him, softening just a little when she saw the look on his face. "You okay? You look like you seen a ghost." Malik didn't know how to answer that. He tied his apron instead. "Just weird morning." "Weird how?" But he didn't reply, and she let it drop. Miss Gloria had learned years ago that Malik only spoke when his heart said it was safe. The breakfast rush hit hard. Line out the door. Folks huddling against the cold. The clang of trays. The shuffle of shoes. The murmured thank yous. Malik moved through it all, clearing tables, pouring coffee, sliding plates across counters with a quiet rhythm. But in stolen moments, when he paused to wipe down a table or refill a jug of juice, his mind darted back to that mound of earth rising, where it had no right to rise. Some things you couldn't ignore. By late morning, once the breakfast crowd thinned out, he found himself staring out the smudged front window, watching cars flick by on Riverside Drive. His fingers drummed anxiously against the metal counter. He had to go back. He didn't trust himself not to. At noon, Ms. Gloria waved him off. "Go take your break before you wear a hole in my floor." That was all he needed. Malik walked fast, almost ran, back toward Willow Creek Cemetery. Sunlight had broken through the clouds now, casting long shadows between rows of headstones. Birds fluttered in the trees. The world looked normal. But the grave wasn't. The mound was taller. He froze at the gate, breath catching like a snagged thread. Yesterday it had risen maybe a few inches. This morning, enough to make him pause. Now, it looked almost double the height, as if something beneath had kept pushing, slow and steady. He swallowed, feeling his throat tighten. He stepped forward slowly, eyes glued to the mound. He wasn't imagining this. He couldn't be. The ground was moving over days, not hours, but still moving. Something was happening under there. "Hey!" The shout cracked across the quiet cemetery. Malik spun around. One of the security guards, the younger one with a buzz cut and permanent scowl, was marching toward him, his boots kicking up gravel. His name tag read, R. Nolan. "What did I tell you yesterday?" Nolan barked. "You can't wander around in here whenever you want." "I'm not wandering," Malik said carefully. You're trespassing." "Trespassing? The gate was open." "Doesn't matter. Folks already complained." "Complained about what?" Malik's heartbeat picked up. "I'm not bothering anyone." Nolan crossed his arms. "People see you hanging around here, and they assume the worst." Malik felt those words like a door slamming in his chest. Assume the worst. Same story, same judgment, same tired script life kept handing him. "I didn't do anything," he said, voice tight. "Then what are you doing back here? And why do you keep standing over that same grave?" "Because something's wrong. Because the ground is rising and warm, and no one but him seems to care. Because maybe, just maybe, if he ignored it, something even worse might happen." But Nolan didn't want explanations. He wanted trouble to stop walking on two legs in front of him. Before Malik could answer, the sound of a car rolling across gravel cut through the air. A sleek black SUV pulled up near the far path, shining like polished obsidian under the sun. The door opened. A tall man stepped out, clean cut, expensive suit even on a weekday afternoon. His hair neatly combed, his shoulders squared. His presence alone seemed to pull the air tight around him. Daniel Rivers. Malik had never spoken to him before, but he'd seen his face enough times in news features and magazine articles to recognize him instantly. One of the wealthiest men in Buckhead, philanthropist, businessman, a man with the kind of power Malik couldn't even begin to understand, and father of the little girl buried beneath that rising grave. Daniel looked up as Nolan approached him. The guard's entire demeanor shifted, posture straighter, voice suddenly respectful. "Mr. Rivers, sir, didn't expect you this early." Daniel didn't return the smile. His eyes cut past the guard and landed directly on Malik. A flicker of something crossed his face. Displeasure, suspicion. It hit Malik like a punch to the ribs. "What's he doing here?" Daniel asked sharply. Nolan didn't hesitate. "I caught him standing over your daughter's grave again." Malik felt heat rise beneath his skin, but before he could speak, Daniel took a step toward him. "You!" The word was a blade. Malik straightened, but only barely. "I didn't touch anything." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then why are you here?" Malik hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. Because something's wrong with her grave." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Wrong?" "The ground's rising," Malik said. "It wasn't like that yesterday, or the day before. It keeps getting higher." For a moment Daniel simply stared at him, the silence stretching thin. Behind him, the wind rustled through the maple branches, casting shifting shadows across the mound. Then Daniel's expression hardened. "That's impossible." "I know what I saw." "You don't know anything," Daniel snapped. Malik flinched, not at the volume but the tone, like he was already guilty, like he didn't deserve to be heard. Nolan stepped in. "Mr. Rivers? I can escort him out." Malik swallowed, shame burning his throat. He wanted to defend himself, wanted to insist he wasn't lying, but his words felt too small against Daniel's anger. Still, he forced them out. "Sir, I'm not making this up." Daniel stared at him with eyes cold as winter glass. "If you come near my daughter's grave again," he said evenly, "I'll make sure you're banned from this property permanently. Do you understand me?" Something inside Malik sank, heavy and familiar. He looked down at his shoes, then at the mound of earth standing quiet and strange behind the two men. "I understand," he murmured. Nolan grabbed his arm, not hard, but firm enough, and began steering him toward the gate. "Let's go." Malik didn't fight. He walked, each step echoing with a dull ache. Just before reaching the exit, he stole one last glance over his shoulder. The mound looked even taller from this angle. The sunlight hit it in a way that made the grass gleam, alive, growing. He whispered under his breath, so soft no one else could hear, "You'll see it, eventually." But Daniel had already turned away, heading toward the headstone with suspicion darkening his face. Malik stepped outside the gate, heart bruised, breath unsteady. He leaned against the rusted iron fence, staring down at the cracks in the sidewalk as the world moved on around him. Being looked at like he was trouble never got easier. Being doubted hurt in ways he thought he'd grown numb to. But this felt different. This felt wrong. And deep in his chest, beneath the pain and the humiliation, one thought rose like a stubborn flame refusing to go out. Someone had to do something. Behind him, inside the cemetery, Daniel's sharp voice carried faintly on the wind. "What did you say was wrong with the grave?" And Malik closed his eyes, knowing this wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, Willow Creek Cemetery wore a different kind of quiet. Not the gentle hush of dawn, but a heavier stillness, like the whole place was listening. Malik felt it as soon as he pushed the gate open. A breeze brushed past him, carrying the faint scent of dew and clipped grass. The sky was pale blue, washed clean from last night's rain. His shift at the kitchen wouldn't start for another hour, but Malik hadn't been able to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the mound rising from the ground, saw Daniel's cold stare, heard Nolan's voice accusing him of things he hadn't done. So he walked, hands in pockets, shoulders hunched, back toward the one place he'd been told not to go. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want to be here. But he couldn't stay away. As he crossed the gravel path, he noticed how the sun reached through gaps in the tree branches, falling in long golden stripes. Somewhere, a bird chirped. Somewhere else, a lawnmower started up. But the farther he walked, the more those sounds faded, as if he were walking into a separate world. When he came within sight of Lila Rivers's grave, he stopped dead in his tracks. It had grown again. The mound that had barely reached his ankle yesterday now stood almost level with his shin. The curve of it was unmistakable. No trick of light, no uneven soil, no simple shift in the earth. It had risen in the night, pushed up from below. Malik's breath fluttered in his chest. "This ain't normal," he whispered. "Ain't no way." He stepped closer, moving slowly so his footsteps didn't disturb the morning stillness. Dew clung to the fresh green grass coating the mound, sparkling like diamonds under the sun. He crouched, brushing his fingertips lightly over the top. The grass bent, soft and healthy, almost springy. Beneath it, the ground still felt warm. It wasn't just rising. It felt alive. A low rumble rolled across the cemetery. Malik jerked his head up in time to see the groundskeeper, Jimmy, pushing a mower across the far lot. The man was older, heavy-set, always chewing gum like it owed him money. Jimmy didn't notice Malik. His headphones were in, his attention swallowed by the engine's sputtering rhythm. Good. Malik didn't want another confrontation. He slid his backpack off his shoulder, unzipped it carefully, and pulled out something small and worn. his old navy blue jacket. The rain last night had soaked most of the graves, but Lila's pinwheel, white plastic with tiny pink hearts, was still damp, the petals stuck together. Malik looked at it for a long moment. The wind picked up again, gentle but cold. Without thinking twice, he laid his jacket across the pinwheel and flowers that someone had left. It wasn't much, but it shielded them from the morning chill. Something about that gesture felt right. Like the smallest way to show respect, he stood again, wiping his palms on his jeans. "Why are you growing?" he murmured at the earth beneath him. "What's happening down there?" Before he could think too long on it, a sharp voice cut across the quiet. "What did I tell you about coming back here?" Malik closed his eyes for a beat. The voice was unmistakable. He turned around. Officer Nolan was stomping across the grass, jaw tight, fists clenched at his sides. His badge glinted in the sunlight, and his glare held the same suspicion as yesterday, only sharper now. "I didn't touch anything," Malik said, hands lifting instinctively. "Don't lie to me," Nolan snapped. "I saw you leaning over the grave. You were only what? Digging around? Planning something?" Malik stiffened. "I was covering the flowers. Rain messed them up." "Oh, now you care about flowers?" Nolan scoffed. "You think I'm stupid?" Malik felt the humiliation burn in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "I'm not trying to cause trouble." "Then why are you back here?" Nolan demanded. "Why this grave? Why today?" Malik hesitated. The truth felt ridiculous when spoken out loud, but lying would only make it worse. "The ground changed again," he said finally. "It's higher. It wasn't like this yesterday." Nolan barked a laugh. "The ground changed? That's your big story?" "It's the truth." "The truth," Nolan repeated mockingly. "The truth is, you've been hanging around a child's grave, and Mr. Rivers doesn't want you anywhere near it." Malik's mouth felt dry. "I'm not doing anything wrong. If something strange is happening, somebody should know." "Not you," Nolan snapped. "You don't tell anybody. You just get out." He reached for Malik's arm again, but Malik stepped back, refusing to let that familiar humiliation wash over him twice. "I said I didn't do anything," Malik said, louder this time but still controlled. "I'm not lying." "Then leave. Last warning." "Why?" Malik shot back, feeling the hurt sharpen inside him. "'Cause I look like someone who don't belong here? That it?" Nolan's expression didn't change, but silence answered for him. And for a moment, Malik felt 9 years old again, standing in the hallway of his old apartment building while the landlord accused him of stealing a wallet he'd never touched. That same helplessness, that same burn behind the eyes. He forced a slow breath in. "I'm not the one disrespecting her grave." "Enough," Nolan growled. "Get out, or I call it in." Malik swallowed his frustration. He thought about Ms. Gloria, the kitchen, the people who depended on him. One wrong move could cost him everything. So he nodded slowly. "Fine. I'm leaving." He turned toward the gate, shoulders tight, hands fisted in his pockets. But before he stepped through, he glanced back and froze. Daniel Rivers was standing beside Lila's grave. The man must have arrived quietly, too quietly for a luxury SUV on gravel. He wasn't looking at Malik, or at Nolan, or at anything except the mound. His face had gone pale. He crouched and pressed his hand against the same patch of grass Malik had touched that morning. When he felt the warmth beneath, his hand jerked back slightly. Even from a distance, Malik could see the shift in Daniel's expression. It wasn't anger this time. It was fear. Nolan's confidence faltered. "Sir? Everything okay?" Daniel didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the mound. on how unnatural its curve was, how green the grass looked, how wrong everything felt. Malik's breath hitched. Finally. Finally. Someone else was seeing it too. Daniel rose slowly to his feet, his breath visible in the cold morning air. He didn't look at Malik. Not yet. But he didn't look through him anymore. "Officer Nolan," Daniel said quietly. "What did he tell you yesterday?" Nolan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Daniel stepped closer to the mound. His jaw twitched. His voice came out low, unsettled. "This wasn't like this yesterday." Malik didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. For the first time since the grave had started to rise, he wasn't the only witness. And that changed everything. Not the anger, not the suspicion, not the fear, but the truth. It was finally too big to ignore. And as Malik watched Daniel touch the mound again, eyes wide with dawning worry, he felt something shift deep inside him, something heavier than fear, stronger than humiliation. Hope. Not for himself, but for the little girl who deserved someone to care what was happening to her grave. This time, it wasn't just Malik who knew something was wrong. Someone with power saw it too, and the story was no longer his alone. But knowing that didn't make Malik's feet any lighter as he walked away from the cemetery. His chest still felt tight, and the familiar weight of being judged, of being looked at like a problem, hung over him like a shadow. Even if Daniel Rivers had finally seen the mound with his own eyes, it didn't erase the sting of being yelled at, pushed aside, accused for no reason. The city seemed to press in around him as he made his way back toward the bus stop. Cars rushed past, horns blaring. Sunlight flashed off windshields in sharp, cold bursts. The world was awake and busy, but Malik felt like he was walking underwater, every sound muffled, every step slow. He tucked his hands deep into the pockets of his hoodie, fingers brushing over the thin lining. His jacket, the one he'd left behind covering Lila's flowers, had been his only real coat. The one thing that kept him warm when nights dipped below freezing. But he didn't regret leaving it there. The thought of that pinwheel shivering in the cold had bothered him too much. It always bothered him when something small and helpless had to suffer. He approached the bus shelter, a cracked plexiglass box with graffiti tagging every corner. The morning crowd had already cleared out, leaving only an old vending machine humming next to the bench and a man curled up beneath it with a blanket of newspapers. Street sounds echoed through the underpass nearby. Malik sat at the far end of the bench, the metal still cold beneath him. The shelter's overhead light flickered every few seconds, buzzing like an angry insect. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, and let out a shaky breath. It wasn't just the grave. It was everything. The way Nolan had grabbed him like he was dangerous. The way Daniel had looked at him, like he had no right to speak. The way he felt himself shrink even when he tried to stand tall. He thought he'd grown numb to it over the years. But some mornings, it still hurt. A city bus roared past without stopping, kicking up a gust of wind that rattled the loose plexiglass panel behind him. Malik closed his eyes, trying to quiet the noise inside his head. For a moment, memories crept in. Memories he didn't ask for. A younger version of himself, sitting on a hospital chair all night long as his mother fought for breath in a dim room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. The way doctors walked past him without making eye contact. The way he'd begged for help and been told to wait. 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 Until it was too late. A different memory. Being 12, staring at a landlord who insisted he'd stolen a wallet, even as tears ran down his face and he swore he hadn't touched it. The landlord didn't care. He saw a poor black boy and decided that was all he needed to know. Malik's fingers tightened around the edge of the bench. He'd spent his whole life fighting to be seen as more than other people's assumptions. And still, here he was, just trying to help, and they treated him like a threat. He bowed his head, eyes fixed on the concrete. A soft voice broke the silence. "It got higher again today, didn't it?" Malik's head jerked up. The homeless man who had been lying beneath the vending machine was now sitting upright, his blanket tucked around him. He was older, maybe mid-60s, with a wiry gray beard and tired blue eyes. Malik had seen him before, wandering the downtown streets. Most folks avoided him. Malik had given him sandwiches a few times. "You were at the cemetery," the man said quietly. "I saw you walking out." Malik hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, it grew again." The man leaned back, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "I told you yesterday, some things keep growing even when they're supposed to be still." Malik blinked. "What do you mean?" The man tilted his head, studying him. "You ever seen grief? Real grief?" he asked in a raspy voice. "It don't stay buried. It pushes up. It changes things. Sometimes it grows out of the ground. Sometimes it grows out of people." Malik didn't know what to say to that. The man's eyes held a kind of haunted understanding. Before Malik could respond, the man added, "Kids feel stuff stronger than we do. Sometimes they leave pieces of themselves behind." Malik frowned. "You sound like you've seen this before." A soft laugh escaped the man. "Son, I've seen a lot of things most folks pretend ain't real." The light overhead flickered, casting the man in brief moments of shadow and gold. It made his expression hard to read. Sad, maybe, or something else entirely. Malik wrapped his arms around himself. I don't know what to do." "People won't believe you," the man said plainly. "Not at first, especially folks who think money keeps the world in order." "You talking about her dad?" "I'm talking about anyone who lives too far from hurt. They can't see what pain does to a place." Malik let the words settle. They weren't comforting, but they were true. He looked out at the street again, where cars kept rushing past, like nothing strange was happening just a few blocks away. Nothing stirring under the ground, nothing rising from the earth. The man reached into his blanket, pulling out a small thermos. "You look cold," he said, offering it to Malik. "Ain't much, but it's warm." Malik's throat tightened. "You don't have to, I know," the man said softly, "but I'm offering anyway." It was such a small gesture, but it hit Malik unexpectedly hard. Maybe because no one had offered him anything in a long time. Maybe because kindness always felt like a rare gift in a loud, harsh world. "Thanks," he said, taking it carefully. Steam rose as he unscrewed the cap, letting the heat seep into his fingers. His eyes stung for a moment, and he blinked it away. "You're a good man," the older man murmured, almost to himself. "Rare kind." Malik swallowed. "Doesn't feel like it right now. Good men don't always get treated good. That's just how the world is." The man pulled his blanket tighter. "But keep going back. Something's happening there, and it ain't done yet." A bus approached in the distance, the one heading toward the kitchen. Malik capped the thermos and handed it back. The man shook his head. "Keep it. I'll find another." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." The bus pulled up with a gust of exhaust. Malik stood. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Really?" The man nodded, settling back under his blanket. "Get going, son. You got things waiting for you." Malik climbed aboard the bus, heart heavier than when he'd arrived, but also steadier somehow. He took a seat by the window, watching the homeless man shrink into the distance as the bus pulled away. Outside, the streets flowed past in streaks of gray and white. But in his mind, he saw only one thing: that mound of earth, rising into the morning light, refusing to stay buried. And even though he'd been pushed away, yelled at, doubted, he knew one truth above all others: he would go back again. Because something was wrong. Because no one else had cared enough to notice. Not until today, and because somewhere deep inside him, beneath all the hurt and fear, he couldn't shake the feeling that the little girl beneath that grave was trying to tell someone something, maybe even him. This wasn't over. Not by a long mile. By the next morning, word had already begun moving through Willow Creek like a wind that didn't have a source. No one could say exactly who started whispering first. The elderly gardener who swept the paths near the veterans section, the group of joggers who cut through the cemetery at dawn, or the widow who left flowers every Thursday. But the whispers had grown roots. Something was happening to Lila Rivers's grave. Something no one had an explanation for. And for the first time since it all began, Malik wasn't the only one carrying the weight of knowing. The air felt different as he approached the cemetery gates. Thicker, almost humming. Fog hovered low across the grass, a bluish-white blanket that shifted like breath. The iron bars of the gate were slick with dew, beating like tiny glass beads. Malik pushed them open carefully, the hinges groaning. He wasn't sure what he expected to see. He only knew what he feared, that the mound would be higher again. He took slow steps down the gravel path, his hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets, each footfall crunching lightly beneath him. The closer he got, the quieter the world seemed to grow, as though the birds and rustling leaves were holding their breath. And then he saw it. The grave wasn't just higher, it had nearly doubled. The mound now rose almost to his knee, the earth pushed upward in a smooth, rounded swell. The grass atop it was greener than any patch in the cemetery, lush, almost glowing under the thin morning light. It was wrong. Beautiful and wrong. Malik froze. He felt his heart thump once, heavy like a fist against a locked door. His breath caught. "Lord," he murmured under his breath, unable to say more. A soft gasp made him turn. Not far away, an older woman, hair curled neatly beneath a sun hat, stumbled back a step, one hand flying to her chest. She had a basket of carnations in her arm, but one fell to the ground as she stared at the grave with wide, frightened eyes. Her whisper cracked in the air. "It's higher again. Something's pushing it from underneath." Malik swallowed. Even if she didn't say it outright, he could hear the fear beneath her words. The grave looked as though it was breathing. Before he could answer, gravel crunched behind them. Another figure approached, this one larger, dressed in a dark jacket and slacks. Daniel Rivers walked slowly toward the grave, his face pale, lips tight. He looked like he hadn't slept, and that he was holding on to himself by sheer force. When he reached the edge of the mound, he knelt. His palm hovered above the earth, then lowered. Malik held his breath. Daniel's hand touched the soil. He jerked it back. The earth was warm, not sun-warmed, not body temperature warm, but alive warm, like something under it was pulsing. Daniel stared at his own hand, as though betrayed by his senses. Then, slowly, he looked up at Malik for, the first time since this began, suspicion wasn't the only thing in his eyes. There was something else now. Fear. And a small, grudging respect. "You said it was rising," Daniel whispered, voice rough. "You tried to tell us." Malik didn't answer. He didn't have words. None of this made sense. But he'd known deep down that he wasn't wrong. And now Daniel knew it too. Another tremor of movement stirred in the soil, barely visible but unmistakable. A faint crack in the earth shifted, as if something beneath the surface stretched against it. The older woman backed up even farther, whispering words that sounded like a prayer. Daniel ran a shaky hand through his hair. "This isn't normal," he murmured. "This is... Sir." A stern voice cut through the tension. Walter Hughes, the cemetery manager, strode toward them with a practiced air of authority. He was a heavy-set man with deep-set eyes and a reputation for knowing this land better than anyone. His clipboard was tucked beneath one arm, and he looked irritated until he saw the mound. His expression changed instantly. He crouched beside the grave, pressing into the dirt with professional care. He parted a patch of grass, examined a line where the earth had cracked, then placed both palms on the mound. He went still. Then he said very quietly, "This isn't settling. Settling goes downward. This is being pushed up." Daniel's jaw clenched. "So you see it too?" Walter nodded. "I've managed this cemetery for 30 years. I've never seen anything like this." The older woman stepped closer. Shouldn't you check inside? Make sure everything is as it should be?" The question was gentle, but it felt like a stone dropping into a pond, ripples of dread spreading instantly. Walter looked at Daniel. "She's right. The mound is growing from inside. We need to open it. Check the coffin. Check the soil. Find out what's causing it." Daniel froze, shoulders tightening. His grief was raw, still open, still bleeding. The idea of disturbing his daughter's resting place made his whole frame tremble. He turned away, jaw working, eyes squeezed shut. Malik watched him, feeling something inside his own chest twist. He knew what loss looked like. He knew what it felt like to have the last resting place of someone you loved touched by strangers. He knew that helpless rage and quiet fear. He cleared his throat. "Sir, if something's wrong down there, you gotta know. She'd want you to." Daniel didn't turn, but Malik saw his shoulders drop. After a long moment, Daniel finally whispered, "I don't know if I can see her again." "No one said you gotta," Malik replied gently. "But she's your little girl. You gotta protect her, even now." Daniel turned, meeting Malik's eyes fully. For the first time, the look wasn't one of suspicion or class divide or judgment. It was just one father, staring at another man who understood pain. Walter exhaled. "Mr. Rivers, I need your permission. If this continues, the grave could rupture on its own." More silence. Then Daniel nodded, barely. "Do it. Open it." Walter signaled to a pair of groundskeepers standing near the tool shed. They began gathering shovels, stabilizing boards, and gloves. The older woman stepped back respectfully, clutching her basket. Malik stayed where he was. He didn't know why. But he felt he needed to witness this. He wasn't leaving, not until they understood what was happening. And as the men approached with their tools, as Daniel wrapped his arms around himself and Walter prepared to break the surface of the strange rising mound, Malik felt a shiver run down his spine. Because deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of a truth no one was ready for, and whatever they found beneath that earth was going to change everything. The decision hung in the air like a weight, pressing down on each person standing beneath the pale morning sky. The fog had thinned, but what replaced it was no comfort. Just a cold, honest silence that felt too heavy for daylight. Even the birds seemed to know better than to sing. Walter Hughes adjusted his gloves, the leather creaking softly. He wasn't a man easily rattled. 30 years of managing Willow Creek had given him a thick skin and a calm patience. But today his jaw was tight, and a small vein pulsed at his temple. Malik noticed it immediately. This wasn't routine. This wasn't even close. Two groundskeepers approached with shovels, but Walter lifted a hand, stopping them before they could begin. "Hold on," he said, voice low but firm. "Let me assess the surface first." He crouched beside the mound again, pressing his fingers into the cracks between the blades of grass. Malik could almost swear the grass moved, not visibly, but in a way that made his skin crawl. It seemed too fresh, too alive, as though fed by something beneath the soil. Daniel stood a few feet back, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His fingers gripped his sleeves with white-knuckled tension. He looked like a man bracing for a storm he knew he couldn't stop. Malik stood closest, his heart thudding with a mix of fear and something else, an instinct he didn't fully understand. He felt drawn to the grave, pulled in by a need he couldn't name. Walter took a slow breath. "We're not digging it like a regular exhumation," he murmured, almost to himself. "The earth isn't behaving normally. If I puncture too deep whatever's under there—" He didn't finish. Daniel swallowed hard. "Just don't hurt her resting place." Walter nodded. "I'll be as gentle as I can." He lifted a thin metal probe, something Malik hadn't seen before. Long, slender, with a rounded tip. Walter pushed it carefully into the top layer of the mound. The soil gave way too easily. He pushed a little deeper. The probe slid in like the earth had no weight at all. Walter frowned. "It's hollow in sections," he whispered. "Not cave-like, more like the soil's been displaced upward." Daniel stepped closer. "Displaced how?" Walter didn't answer immediately. He probed another angle. Same result. He tried a third. The probe sank again, smooth, uninterrupted. "It's like something under there expanded," he finally said. "Like a root system, or pressure from below." Malik's pulse quickened. "Roots?" Walter nodded grimly. "Possibly, but roots powerful enough to lift soil this evenly. That's unusual, especially for something planted only weeks ago." Daniel's face changed. Just a flicker, but Malik caught it. A memory, a fear he didn't say out loud. Walter withdrew the probe and looked at the two groundskeepers. "Bring the narrow spades, not the large ones. We need precision." The men hurried back to the tool shed. Daniel stared at the mound, his voice barely above a breath. "My daughter loved plants," he murmured. "She carried that little sapling everywhere." Malik lowered his eyes. He felt that grief, felt how it lived, how it clung to every word Daniel said. His own memories stirred, soft and sharp at the same time. His mother singing while tending a tiny potted fern in their kitchen, telling him that things grow when people love them. He blinked away the ache. The groundskeepers returned with narrow spades, short, flat-edged tools meant for careful digging. Walter motioned for them to stand on either side of him. "Stay shallow," Walter instructed. "Remove just the topsoil, nothing deeper until we know what's underneath." The first scrape of metal against earth made Malik's stomach tighten. The sound was too loud, too final. Small clumps of dirt lifted away, exposing the underside soil, rich, dark, unnaturally soft. With each careful scrape, the mound seemed to exhale a faint breath of warmth. Walter paused. "Feel that?" One worker nodded. "It's warm." Daniel wrapped his arms around himself, shivering even though the air wasn't cold. Walter took another slow scrape, then froze. A thin, fibrous strand appeared in the soil. Light brown, almost golden, moving through the dirt like a small vein. But it wasn't rough like a dry root. It looked fresh, alive. And it wasn't alone. A second strand emerged with the next lift of soil. Then a third. They intertwined like threads of an intricate pattern. Daniel inhaled sharply. What is that?" Walter leaned closer. Roots, he whispered. But this density, this direction, they're growing upward. Malik felt a chill crawl over his skin. Upward? Yes, Walter murmured, as if reaching for the surface. A sudden shift of dirt made everyone step back. The earth dipped slightly, like something beneath adjusted itself. Just a small movement, but undeniable. The older woman from earlier gasped from a distance, covering her mouth with trembling hands. Daniel's voice strained. Is something alive under there? No, Walter said quickly, too quickly. Not in the way you're thinking. He drew in a breath to steady himself. But something is pushing up. Something alive, yes, but plant life. Daniel's shoulders sagged, relief and confusion mixing like storm clouds. Then why is the mound rising so fast? He demanded. Walter looked at him, not unkindly, but with a weight that only experience granted. Roots usually spread sideways, not vertically, and not this aggressively unless… He hesitated. Malik leaned in. Unless what? Unless the plant had something extraordinary feeding it, Walter said quietly. Something that gave it reason to grow faster, stronger, something emotional, even. Daniel's face drained of color. Malik's throat tightened. This wasn't just a plant. This wasn't random. Something connected. One of the groundskeepers cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Hughes, should we continue? Walter didn't answer right away. He studied the mound, the roots, the way the earth seemed almost pulsing with warmth. Then he made a decision. No, he said finally. Not yet. Not until we understand what we're dealing with. If we dig blindly, we might cause damage. And this, he gestured to the roots, this might be something delicate. Daniel stared, confusion and grief warring in his eyes. So what do we do? Walter exhaled slowly. We pause. We study. We observe. Tonight, I'll review old planting records, burial logs, soil patterns. Tomorrow morning, we try again, with care, with preparation. Daniel swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Malik felt the tension in his chest ease slightly, but not the fear, not the sense that something bigger was unfolding. As the workers repacked the tools and brushed soil back over the shallow scrape, Walter turned to both men. We're not finished, he said, but we will not make a mistake by rushing. He stepped closer to Daniel. And Mr. Rivers, I think you should come back tomorrow. Daniel nodded. Then Walter turned to Malik, surprising both of them. And you too. Daniel stiffened slightly at that. Why him? Walter's answer was simple. Because it was the truth, and everyone could feel it. He saw it first. Daniel turned, his eyes narrowing, not with anger now, but with something heavier, something resembling respect. Malik held his gaze. Whatever was happening beneath that earth, it wasn't finished, not by a long mile, and for the first time, they were in it together. But when they left Willow Creek that afternoon, each man walking in a different direction, down different streets, toward wildly different worlds, nothing felt settled. Nothing felt close to answers. If anything, the questions had grown heavier. The sky dimmed early, sinking into a dull orange that melted into purple shadows across Atlanta. A thin drizzle began to fall, tapping against street signs and glistening across front lawns. Traffic hummed somewhere in the distance. Porch lights flickered on one by one. Daniel Rivers walked through the broad stone doorway of his Buckhead mansion. But even inside that grand hallway, with its marble floors and soft, warm lighting, the world felt cold. His staff greeted him quietly, unsure of his mood. He brushed past them, heading straight to the sitting room. He didn't bother turning on the lights. He stood in the dark, staring out through the towering windows, watching raindrops slide like long silver tears against the glass. The reflection that stared back at him wasn't the confident businessman he was used to seeing, just a father whose pain never loosened its grip. He poured a glass of water but left it untouched. Upstairs, the door to his daughter's room stood cracked open. A soft glow spilled out. Her nightlight, shaped like a crescent moon, still turned on 3 months after she was gone because he couldn't bear to switch it off. He stepped toward the staircase, but his legs stiffened halfway. His hand squeezed the railing. He wasn't ready. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. He lowered his head, closing his eyes as memories surged. Lila's laugh echoing through the halls, her little footsteps racing toward him, her tiny hands holding that potted plant as though it were something precious, alive, worth protecting. A sound escaped him, a breath, shaky and raw. He turned away. Meanwhile, in a part of the city the Rivers family never drove through, Malik Johnson sat alone on the edge of his cot, in a cramped room above a discount tire shop. His whole place wasn't bigger than one of Daniel's walk-in closets. The walls were thin enough that he could hear the low thump of bass from the bar downstairs and the occasional argument drifting in from the alley. A draft leaked through the badly sealed window, carrying the smell of wet pavement and frying oil from the food truck across the street. Malik pulled his hoodie tighter and exhaled. Day after day, his life never changed much. Wake up, walk across the cemetery, catch the bus, work at the community kitchen till evening, then come home to this small, tired room. But tonight, after everything he saw, normal felt like another world. He thought about the way the earth had moved beneath Walter's probe, about the roots spreading upward, about Daniel's face when he touched the warm soil. Malik rubbed his hands together slowly, trying to chase the chill that kept settling under his skin. "Why me?" he whispered into the dim room. "Why was I the first one to see it?" He lay back on the cot, staring at the water-stained ceiling. His mother had once told him, "Sometimes God puts certain things in front of the right eyes." He never knew what she meant. Not really. But tonight he wondered. He drifted in and out of thought until a faint tapping sound caught his attention. Tap, tap, tap. The window pane rattled with the rhythm of rain. A passing car splashed through a puddle below. Somewhere in the hallway, a neighbor's television played an old sitcom laugh track that felt strangely out of place. Malik sighed. Sleep wasn't coming. He reached over to the nightstand and picked up a small wooden cross, something he'd kept since the day they buried his mother. He held it tightly. "I'm trying, Ma," he whispered. "I'm doing the best I can." But even in that fragile moment, something tugged at him. A thought he couldn't shake. He should go back. At dawn. No matter what Daniel thought of him, no matter who else doubted him, he needed to see that grave again. He needed to understand. Because whatever was happening didn't feel random anymore. A sudden flicker of light caught his eye. The street lamp outside his window sputtering, then glowing bright. The reflection flashed against the glass, illuminating a thin crack running across the window frame. Raindrops slipped through, falling onto the floor one by one. He watched the droplets form small dark spots on the wood. Thump, thump. His heart beat harder. Something in him shifted, a decision, firm and steady. He stood, pacing the small space, hands on his hips. "I ain't letting this go," he murmured, voice low and resolute. "I don't care who thinks I'm crazy." He stopped in front of the tiny mirror above the sink. His own tired eyes stared back. Eyes that had seen too much loss, too many people walking past him like he didn't matter. He straightened his shoulders. "Even if they don't like me, even if they don't trust me, I'm going back." Someone's got to do the right thing. The rain outside grew stronger, tapping like fingers against the window. Across the city, Daniel stood alone in the dim sitting room, looking down at his shaking hands. He whispered into the silence, "Lila, what's happening to you?" The night swallowed both men in their separate solitude. Two worlds apart, two hearts haunted, and yet drawn to the same rising mound of earth. Hours passed slowly. Rest avoided them both. By the time the darkest part of night settled in, an unspoken truth had grown roots deep inside each man. Neither of them would be able to stay away tomorrow. Not from the grave, not from the mystery pulling at their souls, not from the bond that was slowly forming, quiet and fragile, between a grieving father and a man the world never treated gently. The clock ticked, the rain eased, and somewhere beyond the city lights, Willow Creek lay in silence, holding its breath for dawn. Malik whispered a final vow into the shadows of his little room. "Tomorrow, I'm going back." And nothing, no fear, no judgment, no past, was going to stop him. Morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of sky that made the world feel hushed, as if holding itself still for something it couldn't quite name. Malik stepped out of his small room before the sun had fully risen, hoodie pulled over his head, breath visible in the crisp air. His shoes splashed quietly through puddles left from the night's rain. The world was waking slow, but something inside him moved fast, pulling him toward Willow Creek like a thread tugging at his chest. He boarded the early bus, the one mostly used by night shift workers heading home. No one spoke. The hum of the engine filled the silence. Malik kept his hands clenched in his pockets, leg bouncing without him noticing. Every street they passed, every turn, built a tighter knot in his stomach. He stepped off 2 stops early, walking the remaining blocks. His feet knew the way by now. He could have walked blindfolded. Willow Creek sat ahead, its gates tall and iron black, framed by dew-slicked hedges. The cemetery was quieter than usual. No gardeners yet, no early visitors placing flowers. Even the birds seemed to wait. As Malik approached, he saw 2 figures already standing near the mound: Daniel Rivers and Walter Hughes. The father and the cemetery manager stood side by side, both staring at the grave like men who'd run out of ways to understand the world. Malik slowed, pulse hammering. Daniel turned first, eyes lingering on Malik with something almost like respect, or maybe just the kind of fear that softens a man's pride. "You came back," Daniel said, voice low. "I said I would," Malik replied, stepping closer. Did it grow again?" Walter nodded grimly. "Overnight. Faster than before." He motioned toward the mound. "You should see it for yourself." Malik stepped forward, and his breath left him. The mound was now enormous, easily up to Malik's hip, perfectly round, its grass greener than any patch in the cemetery. Sunlight broke through a thin crack in the clouds, landing right on the top of it. The green glowed like it had its own heartbeat. Malik swallowed. "Lord have mercy." Daniel rubbed his hands over his face. "We can't ignore this anymore." His voice cracked. "Something's happening under there. Something connected to my daughter." Walter took a slow breath. "There's only one way to know." He lifted a hand and motioned toward a small crew approaching from the maintenance shed. 3 workers carrying tools. Shovels, soft brushes, careful hands. Daniel stiffened. "You're sure this is the right thing?" "It may be the only thing," Walter answered gently. Malik's gaze stayed locked on the mound. Every instinct inside him, every memory of dirt under his nails from childhood chores, Every whisper of intuition he'd inherited from his mother told him something living was beneath the soil, something pushing to reach daylight. The workers approached with slow, respectful steps. "Mr. Rivers," the woman at the front said softly, "we'll be as careful as possible." Daniel nodded once. "Begin." The first shovel cut into the earth with barely any resistance, like sinking into warm bread. A smell rose, not unpleasant, but strangely fresh, like after rainfall in spring. One scoop, another, layers of soft, damp soil lifting away. Malik stood rigid, eyes glued to every movement. The second worker paused. "This soil's too loose," he murmured, "like something's been stirring it." Then, a sharp sound, a metallic kirk beneath the shovel. "Hold up," the lead worker whispered. Everyone froze. She knelt, pushing soil aside with gloved hands. Her motions were gentle, reverent, like she was afraid she might brush against something sacred. And then they saw it. A thin strand, brown, twisted, alive. A root, not from any tree around them. Its texture was different, too smooth, too young. More digging revealed more strands, spreading outward like veins, coiling through the earth. One worker breathed, "It's like a whole network under here." Daniel staggered back. "Roots? Under my daughter's grave?" "There were no trees planted around here." Walter frowned. "Unless something was buried with her." The words felt heavy, settling into the cold air. Malik knelt beside the workers, drawn in by instinct more than courage. He reached out and lightly touched one of the strands. It was warm. A spark raced through him, up his arm, straight to his chest. "This ain't no ordinary root," he whispered. "Keep going," Walter said urgently. More soil lifted, more strands appeared. Then the woman gasped, "Sir, you need to see this." She held up something small, gentle, delicate, a tiny branch, still green, still alive. Daniel's knees buckled. He sank to the ground like the weight of the world had finally found him. "That's impossible," he whispered. No, that's her tree. That's Lila's tree." Malik blinked. "Her tree?" Daniel nodded shakily. "She kept a little potted plant in her room, watered it every morning, said it would live even when she couldn't." His voice broke. "I didn't know they buried it with her." Malik felt his throat tighten. He touched the small branch, its bark still soft, its green vibrant. This wasn't death pushing upward. It was life. A life Lila believed in. Walter's voice softened. "The mound grew because the roots are spreading. This tree, it's fighting its way to the surface." Daniel closed his eyes, tears slipping down his face. "She wanted something of hers to keep growing," he whispered. "Something to stay alive." Malik stood slowly, heart swelling with something he didn't have a name for. A kind of sorrow, a kind of wonder, a kind of grace. The workers paused, awaiting instruction. Walter turned to Daniel. "Sir, do you want us to trim it back, control it, or—" Daniel shook his head hard. No, let it grow. Let it become whatever it wants." Malik placed a hand gently over the mound, warm, alive, breathing. He whispered, "She's keepin' her promise." And he wasn't talking about the little girl. He was talking about something bigger, something none of them fully understood yet. The workers covered the roots with care, shaping the soil gently. The mound remained tall, but now its secret no longer lay hidden. Malik stepped back, a quiet awe filling his chest. Life had been growing underground all along, and none of them had seen it until now. But as they stood in stunned silence, Walter cleared his throat, a crease forming between his brows. Something else, he said. Something you need to see. Daniel and Malik turned toward him, hearing a tremble in his voice that hadn't been there before. The ground had given up part of its truth, but not all of it. Walter Hughes straightened slowly, brushing the damp soil from his gloves. Something troubled his eyes, something different from the shock they all shared. He looked not at the mound, but toward the small metal office near the gate, where the cemetery kept its records and security equipment. "Mr. Rivers," he said gently, "before we go any further, I think there's something you should see inside." Daniel wiped his face with a trembling hand. "What more could there be?" His voice cracked into the chilly air. "Isn't this enough?" Walter hesitated. "I don't think this is just about the tree." Malik felt the shift instantly, the air tightening, the earth quieting under their feet, as though the cemetery itself was holding its breath. He glanced at Daniel, whose grief had softened into something new: confusion, fear, and a desperate need for truth. "Come with me," Walter said. The walk toward the office was silent except for the crunch of gravel beneath their shoes. A thin wind swirled between the headstones, carrying the faint scent of damp grass and morning dew. Malik kept a respectful distance beside Daniel, whose steps wavered as though each memory of his daughter tugged at him like a weight he couldn't set down. They entered the office, and the sudden warmth fogged the windows. A faint hum of electronics filled the room: the old security monitor, the radio, the creak of the heater. Walter moved behind the desk and pulled out a drawer stuffed with hard drives and labeled cases. After a moment of searching, he slid one across the table toward Daniel. "This is the past 3 weeks of cemetery footage," Walter said. "Every angle, every path, including the one facing your daughter's grave." Daniel blinked slowly. You have footage of whoever was near her grave?" Malik felt a knot twist in his stomach. He didn't know why, but something inside him wanted to step back, to fade into the corner. His palms began to sweat. Walter nodded. "We monitor everything. Not because we expect trouble, but, well, cemeteries see more than most places." He inserted the footage into the old computer. The screen flickered to life, showing rows of timestamps. Walter clicked on the earliest date, the morning Malik first noticed the mound changing. And then the footage began. The camera angle showed a long stretch of path and Emma Rivers's grave near the center of the frame. Hours compressed into seconds through time-lapse. People came and went. Visitors, workers, mourners. But the mound grew. Slowly, steadily, breathing upward with each passing day. And that wasn't the strangest part. Something else appeared over and over. Malik stopping on his way to the bus every morning. Malik picking up a plastic wrapper someone had dropped. Malik straightening wilted flowers on the neighboring headstones. Malik removing an empty soda can left carelessly near the grave. Malik laying his own jacket over Lila's picture on a rainy day, then hurrying off before anyone noticed. It wasn't sabotage, it wasn't vandalism. It was kindness. Quiet, constant, unnoticed. Daniel leaned forward, mouth falling open. His lips trembled, not with anger this time, but with something fragile, something breaking inside. Why would you do all that?" he whispered without looking away from the screen. Malik swallowed hard. "Because it was the right thing to do." The footage kept playing. More days passed. More rain. More wind. More people ignoring the growing mound. But not Malik, never Malik. Every morning like clockwork he stopped. Fixing, cleaning, protecting, caring. Never looking around for witnesses. Never waiting for thanks. Just doing it. Daniel's eyes filled again. But these tears were different. You weren't lying, Daniel said. About any of it. Malik lowered his head. I told you what I saw, and I didn't listen. Daniel's voice shook with shame. I saw your skin, your clothes, your life, and I made up a story in my head that wasn't true. He exhaled a long, painful breath. I failed my daughter by not hearing the one person who tried to speak for her. Malik didn't know what to say. His chest tightened in a way he wasn't used to. Being believed wasn't something that came often in his life. Walter fast-forwarded the footage. Day after day, the scene repeated. Only one man, one soul in the entire cemetery, noticed the mound growing, not the gardeners, not the visitors, not Daniel. Only Malik, because he looked, he paid attention, he cared. Daniel pressed a hand to his forehead. When he finally turned toward Malik, his expression was stripped raw. No ego, no suspicion, no walls. Just gratitude and regret tangled together. I misjudged you, Daniel said softly. I treated you like a threat when you were guarding something precious. Malik shook his head. I ain't no hero. But you are, Daniel insisted, voice firm despite the quiver, in ways that matter. Walter paused the footage on a frame showing Malik gently brushing leaves away from the mound. It looked almost like he was praying. Daniel stared at it, then whispered, She would have liked you, my Lila. She had a heart like that. Always wanted to help people. The room fell into a thick, quiet stillness. Then Daniel drew a breath, straightened himself as though he'd made a decision, and turned to Malik fully. Tonight, he said, voice soft but unwavering, come to my home. Please, I want to talk. Not about the grave, about you. Malik stiffened. Your home? Yes. My wife's cooking. We'll sit. We'll talk. I need to understand the man who showed more love to my daughter's resting place than I did. Malik looked down at his worn shoes, unsure if he belonged anywhere near a house like Daniel's. I don't know, sir. Daniel's hand trembled as he touched his chest. I'm asking you as a father, he said quietly. Please come. Malik lifted his eyes. Something in Daniel's gaze, humility, gratitude, a kind of brokenness that needed company, reached him. Finally, Malik nodded. All right. Walter slowly exhaled, as if relieved. But before they left the office, Daniel glanced at the paused image on the screen one more time. Malik's quiet kindness captured forever, and the truth landed fully in his heart. The grave might have been growing, but so was something else. Something between two men whose lives were never meant to cross. Until now. And when they stepped outside into the cold air, a single thought pressed itself into Daniel's mind. This mystery wasn't over. It was only beginning. The late afternoon sun slanted low across the quiet Buckhead neighborhood, gilding the tops of manicured hedges and wide stone driveways. As Malik walked up the long, elegant path leading to the Rivers estate, he felt every step like a reminder that he didn't belong here. The home was enormous, windows tall as church doors, pillars rising like white sentinels, the kind of place people whispered about on bus rides. He wiped his palms on his jeans, trying to steady his breath. The front door opened before he could knock. Daniel stood there, not with the stiff posture of a wealthy businessman, but with slumped shoulders and tired eyes. Grief lived in that house like a permanent guest, and it showed in the way Daniel carried himself. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. Malik nodded, unsure what words were safe. He stepped inside and warmth wrapped around him instantly. Soft lighting, wooden floors polished to a shine, the faint scent of rosemary and something baking. Follow me, Daniel said, leading him toward a dining room that looked like something out of a magazine. High ceilings, a long oak table, and framed family photos lining the walls. But there was something strikingly human, painfully real. Toys stacked neatly in the corner, a tiny pink jacket hanging by the door, and on the table a single framed picture of Lila smiling with 2 missing front teeth. It stilled Malik's breath. She looked so alive in that photo, so full of tomorrow. Daniel noticed where his eyes had gone. That was her favorite picture, he murmured. She insisted on wearing that jacket even in summer, said it made her feel like a superhero. A small, raw smile flickered across his face, then faded. From the kitchen, the soft clatter of dishes drifted through the hallway. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, brown hair pulled back neatly, apron still tied around her waist. Her eyes were swollen, as though she'd been crying for days, maybe weeks. "Malik," Daniel said gently. "This is my wife, Sarah." Sarah approached with a shakiness that spoke louder than words. For a moment, she simply studied Malik's face, searching, measuring, wondering who this man was that her husband had brought home. Then she whispered, "Thank you for taking care of our daughter." Malik froze. His voice caught halfway up his throat. "Ma'am, I didn't do nothing special." "You did more than most," she said softly. "You saw her, even after she was gone." Her hand trembled as she reached out, touching his arm briefly before stepping back. "Dinner's almost ready." Malik sat down at the long table, feeling painfully aware of his worn clothes, the paint stain on his sleeve, the frayed edges of his shoes. Everything around him gleamed like it belonged to a different world. Daniel took a seat across from him, folding his hands together. The moment felt heavy, as if both men were standing at the edge of something that couldn't be undone. After a long silence, Daniel spoke. "I've been wrong many times in my life," he began, voice low. "But I've never been as wrong as I was about you." Malik swallowed. "You ain't gotta say all that." "Yes," Daniel insisted, leaning forward. "I do." His eyes glistened. "You were the only one who noticed something strange at her grave. The only one who cared enough to look. The only one who didn't treat her resting place like just another patch of ground." Daniel drew a shaky breath. "And I treated you like a threat, like a man with bad intentions. But all I saw was my own fear, my own assumptions." Malik dropped his gaze, unsure how to receive such honesty. He wasn't used to apologies, especially not from men like Daniel Rivers. Sarah returned with a warm dish, setting it gently on the table, her hands trembling slightly. As she served Malik a plate, she whispered, "We didn't know how to look after her anymore. But you did." The words struck him deeper than he expected. He blinked hard. Dinner was quiet at first, forks clinking softly, light conversations stumbling between long silences. The house felt too big for 3 people, full of echoes and memories. Malik felt Lila everywhere, in the drawings taped to the fridge, the tiny shoes lined neatly near the stairs, the faint sound of a wind chime shaped like a butterfly on the back porch. Then Daniel stood, clearing his throat. "I want to show you something," he said. He walked to a cabinet, opened a bottom drawer, and pulled out a slim folder. When he placed it before Malik, the logo on the front made Malik's heart pause. Rivers and Market Corporate Office Division. Malik glanced at Daniel. "Sir, what's this?" Daniel pulled up a chair beside him instead of across from him. "This," he said, tapping the folder, "is an opportunity. One I should have offered someone long before today." Malik hesitated, confused. I don't understand." Daniel exhaled, gathering strength. I own one of the largest supermarket chains in Atlanta. We are starting a memorial project, something my daughter always talked about. A place for children who passed too soon. A garden. A sanctuary. Malik's eyes widened. I'd like you to be its caretaker, Daniel continued. Its heart. The person who watches over it every day. The way you watched over her. Malik felt the room sway. Daniel kept going. We'll cover training, a full salary, benefits, a home near the garden, if you'll accept it. You'll never have to worry about rent again. Malik's breath quivered out in a shaky whisper. Me? Why me? Sarah answered softly. Because she trusted you. Malik shook his head slowly, overwhelmed. I ain't nobody important. I'm just a man who stopped for a minute on his way to work. Daniel reached out, placing a steady hand on Malik's shoulder. You're the kind of man my daughter believed the world needed more of. Malik felt something break open in his chest. Months, years of being overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. And suddenly he was being seen, truly seen. But before he could speak, Daniel added in a trembling voice, and there's one more thing you deserve to know. Malik looked up sharply. Daniel swallowed, as though the next words weighed more than any grief he'd carried before. It's about that tree, and how it came into her life. The air in the room shifted. Sarah covered her mouth, eyes flooding with emotion. Malik leaned forward, heart pounding. Daniel's voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. You were part of her life before she ever reached that grave. And just like that, another door cracked open, another truth waited in the shadows, and Malik's entire world braced for it. Daniel didn't speak right away. He pressed his hand flat against the table as though steadying himself. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward the soft glow spilling from a small bedroom down the corridor. Lila's room, as if her memory stood there, urging him on. Malik felt his throat tighten. Sir, what are you trying to say? Daniel swallowed hard. That tree, the one buried with her, it wasn't just some plant she liked. It meant something to her. Someone gave it to her in the hospital. A man she trusted. Malik's pulse stuttered. Hospital. Sarah pulled out a folded piece of paper from the drawer, a drawing in faint crayon lines. Pink, blue, and yellow streaks formed the outline of a small tree in a pot. A smiling little girl stood next to it, holding hands with a tall figure in a hoodie. Sarah laid it gently before Malik. We found this in her sketchbook, she whispered. She drew it over and over again during her last month. Malik stared at the drawing. Hard, long, like it was something he'd forgotten how to see. The figure beside the tree. The proportions were unmistakable. Broad shoulders, a slouched posture, baggy clothes, and the hoodie, gray with a tear near the shoulder. A hoodie just like his. A hoodie he once had. He felt the air thin around him. No, it can't be. Daniel's voice grew quiet, like the weight of the moment demanded softness. Lila wrote a note with that drawing. He reached into the folder, hands shaking, and pulled out a small scrap of hospital stationery. In a child's handwriting, for the nice man who cleans the floors. Thank you for the tiny tree. It makes me brave. I hope he grows too. Malik's world tilted. He clutched the edge of the table. Images crashed through his mind. Bright hospital hallways, the soft squeak of cleaning carts, a girl with thinning hair holding onto a stuffed rabbit, smiling at him every time he passed. Her voice, high and sweet. Are you the floor superhero? She once asked him with a grin. He had laughed. If superheroes use mops, maybe. She had shown him her plant, a tiny sapling in a chipped pot. She had said she wanted to give it a home forever. And one afternoon, when she cried because she was afraid of the next treatment, he'd handed her the plant and whispered, "When you're scared, look at this. Plants don't stop growing, no matter what. You keep growing too, okay?" He remembered the moment now with perfect clarity. He remembered her hugging it. He remembered her saying thank you. He remembered everything. "I didn't know she—" Malik choked, unable to finish. Daniel's voice trembled. "You were her comfort. Someone who made her feel safe in a place full of fear. She talked about you more than any doctor or nurse." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "She called you the kind man, the growing man." The room blurred as Malik blinked past the burn in his eyes. His chest felt cracked open, raw, exposed, filled with something unbearably tender. He'd met hundreds of people during his months cleaning hospital floors. But that little girl, she had stayed in his memory like a faint candle he never let himself revisit. He whispered, "I didn't even know she passed." "She did," Sarah said softly, "and she asked for her plant to go with her." Malik pressed his palms against his face. "I gave her that tree because I wanted her to have something hopeful." His voice broke. "And I thought that would be the end of it." Daniel leaned closer. But it wasn't. That tree lived. It grew through earth, through grief, through everything. And the only person who noticed was you. Malik shook his head, overwhelmed. "I ain't nobody special." Daniel's voice sharpened, not harsh but full of conviction. "You are. You were the last gift my daughter ever treasured, and the first person she trusted. That connection, it didn't end. It didn't die in that grave." He pointed toward the window, where night pressed against the glass. "It's growing, right now. That tree is alive because of you." Malik looked down at Lila's drawing again. The little girl holding hands with the man in the hoodie. The child had remembered him. The tree had remembered him. And the ground, shifting, rising, had carried that memory toward the light. He felt something warm break open in his chest. Not pain, not sorrow, but a deep, reverent sense of belonging he'd never known before. Daniel placed a hand over the drawing gently. "I want you to have this. And I want you to know this wasn't chance. Lila believed people meet for a reason." Malik's voice trembled. "What reason?" Daniel smiled sadly. "To help each other grow." The house fell quiet. Not heavy, not grieving, but peaceful. A long, deep, healing quiet. After a moment, Daniel straightened. "There's one more thing," he said. "I told you earlier that I wanted you to take care of the memorial garden, but now I want more than that." He slid a second folder across the table. A contract. "Mr. Johnson, I want you to help build it, design it, shape it into what you think children like Lila would have needed." Malik froze. "Me? Build it?" "You knew her spirit," Daniel said softly. "You kept it alive without even knowing. You're the only person I trust with this." Malik exhaled shakily. The idea felt impossible, like giving wings to a man who had never even stood in the sun. But for the first time in his life, he believed he might deserve a chance to try. Sarah folded her hands. "Our daughter planted a seed in you too." And those words nearly shattered him. Daniel nodded toward the window again. "Tomorrow morning we'll go back to Willow Creek, together, and we'll start planning." Malik felt a quiet resolve settle into him like warm soil around new roots. He whispered, "I'd be honored." Daniel smiled, a real smile, small but full of gratitude. Then tomorrow begins something new. Neither man said what they both felt, that the grave had brought them together. But the tree, the living proof of love refusing to die, was what would keep them moving forward. Night deepened outside, but inside the river's home, something bright had begun to grow, just like Lila wanted, just like her little tree. Morning came slow and golden, the kind of sunrise that softened even the hardest corners of the world. A warm light spilled over the Willow Creek gate as Malik and Daniel walked side by side toward the grave. No suspicion between them now, no distance, no walls. Just two men connected by grief, by fate, and by a tiny tree that refused to die. The mound was taller than ever, its green shimmering in the early sun. Dewdrops clung to each blade like silver beads. The ground looked alive, awake, stretching toward the sky. Malik stood still, taking it in. He felt his heart steady, not racing anymore, not confused, just full. Daniel breathed out a trembling sigh. "It's beautiful," he whispered. They approached slowly, as though the mound were something sacred, and in a way, it was. It held memory, love, and something deeper neither man could fully name. Sarah arrived a moment later, carrying a small watering can, the same color as the one in Lila's drawings. She placed it beside the grave and stepped back, eyes full of quiet reverence. Malik knelt down. He placed his hand on the mound, the way someone might touch the shoulder of an old friend. "Hey there, little one," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "Look at you, growing strong." Daniel stood behind him, arms crossed tightly as if holding himself together. "She would have loved this," he said. "She always believed things kept growing, even when people couldn't." Malik didn't answer. He didn't have to. Walter Hughes approached from a distance, hand lifted in greeting. "Morning," he said softly. "I thought you'd want to see this." He pointed to the far side of the mound. A tiny sprout. Not the roots, not the rising soil, but a small green shoot breaking through the surface. A new beginning. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth. Daniel reached out to steady her. Malik felt his breath catch. The sprout wasn't timid. It was pointed and strong. A bright burst of green against the soft earth. Life pushing upward. Life insisting on being seen. "That's the top of the tree," Walter said quietly. "It's finally broken through." Daniel bowed his head, voice cracking. "Lila, you did it." The four stood around the mound, silent, each feeling something shift inside them. After a long moment, Daniel turned to Malik. "I meant what I said last night," he murmured. "About the garden, about the job, but I want you to understand something else." He stepped closer, placing a steady hand on Malik's shoulder. "You're not just getting a position. You're getting a place in our family, if you'll have it." Malik blinked hard, overwhelmed. "Family?" he whispered. "I ain't had one of those in a long time." "Well," Daniel said with a small smile, "maybe it's time you grow one again." Sarah nodded through her tears. "You brought light back into this place. Into us." Walter stepped forward with something folded in his hand. "Mr. Johnson," he said, offering it gently, "I think this belongs to you now." It was the drawing. Lila's drawing. The little girl holding hands with the man in the hoodie beside a tiny tree. Malik took it reverently, tracing the crayon lines with trembling fingers. "She remembered me," he whispered. "All this time." "She loved you," Sarah said simply. "And love doesn't end." For a long while they stood there, the father, the mother, the caretaker, and the man whose kindness planted a seed that refused to die. Eventually, Daniel drew a deep breath. Let's talk about the garden. They walked a few steps away from the grave, leaving the sprout to greet the sun in peace. Daniel stopped near an open patch of land bordering the cemetery. This is where it begins, he said. The river's memorial garden for children. I want benches, flowers, places for families to sit. And right in the center, he nodded toward the growing mound. This tree will stand, the heart of it all. Malik stared at the land, wide, waiting, full of possibility. His heart pulsed with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. I want to make it something beautiful, he said quietly. Something that feels alive, something kids would have loved. Daniel smiled. Then you're exactly the man we need. A soft breeze moved through the grass, rustling the leaves of a nearby oak. Malik looked back at the sprout, small but determined, just like the little girl who had believed in him long before he knew he mattered. He stepped closer to the grave one last time, bending down to whisper, I'll take care of it, Lila. I promise you. And in the rustling of the tiny leaves, he thought he heard a reply. Days passed. Weeks. The sprout grew into a young sapling, strong and steady. Malik tended it every morning, watering it with the little can Sarah gave him. Visitors stopped to marvel, asking questions, sharing stories. The river's memorial garden slowly took shape under the care of a man no one had ever noticed before. But now, they noticed. They thanked him. They admired him. They believed in him. Because kindness, once planted, grows in ways no one can predict. One sunny afternoon, as Malik finished watering the sapling, Daniel approached with a small wooden plaque. He set it gently at the base of the tree. In honor of Lila Rivers and the man who kept her light alive, Malik Johnson. Malik stared at it, speechless. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't just help a tree grow, he said softly. You helped us grow. Malik swallowed hard, tears blurring the world into something warm and golden. And as the young tree swayed gently in the breeze, its leaves reaching for the sky, it felt like a promise fulfilled. A promise that love keeps growing, even after goodbye, even after loss, even after darkness. Just like Lila wanted, just like her little tree, and just like the man who never stopped believing in doing what was right. If you ever walk through Willow Creek, you'll see it. A tree standing tall, green, alive. A living reminder that kindness never dies. It only grows. If this story touched your heart even a little, drop a 1 in the comments. Just a simple number, but it tells us you're here. You're listening, and these stories mean something to you. And if you want more stories filled with heart, healing, and hope, hit subscribe and stay with us. There are so many more journeys to share with you, and I'd be honored to have you with me for the next one.